All right, what are you two doing out here? And what's in the bag?
Sitting in the park, man. We're not bothering anybody.
Yeah, well, I asked what's in the bag. Go ahead and tell me.
That's not your business.
It is. Now, you see this taser in one hand, cuffs in the other. Last chance. Give me the bag, you're going to jail.
We haven't done anything. You can't just grab our stuff.
Hand it over right now, or both of you under arrest.
Marcus Bennett and Darius Cole were sitting on a park bench in MacArthur Park on a Saturday afternoon when Officer Daniel Hargrove approached them and told them they needed to move, that they were loitering and looked out of place. What Officer Hargrove didn't know was that both men were active FBI special agents in the middle of a federal surveillance operation. And what started as a routine park bench conversation would end with a badge in Hargrove's face, a federal complaint, and a viral video that would cost the Los Angeles Police Department over $1 million. Before we continue, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where our community is tuning in from. If you believe that a federal badge should speak louder than bias, now that 14 years on the force is no excuse for racial profiling, and that authority without accountability is just power with a uniform, like this video and subscribe. Marcus Bennett was 38 years old when this happened, 12 years in federal service, FBI Director's Award for Operational Excellence. Married, father of one, built a career chasing organized crime from the inside out. Darius Cole was 35, 10 years in the Bureau, cybercrime and field intelligence, led sting operations across the state of California. On a Saturday afternoon at 3:45 p.m., they were sitting on a park bench in the Los Angeles sun, not undercover in a warehouse, not running surveillance from a vehicle. Just two men in casual clothes on a bench doing their jobs. Officer Daniel Hargrove had 14 years on the force and 6 prior civilian complaints for racial profiling, excessive force, and unlawful detainment. Every single one had been dismissed, and his body camera was about to record the one mistake that the department could not make disappear. Studies consistently show that black men are disproportionately stopped, questioned, and detained in public spaces, not because of behavior, but because of presence. What you're about to watch is what happens when that calculation runs headfirst into a federal badge. Marcus Bennett had been on his feet since 6 that morning. The operation had been running for 11 days, long stretches of patience interrupted by short bursts of critical observation. By early afternoon, he and Darius Cole had relocated their position to a public bench near the park's eastern walking path, close enough to maintain sightlines on their target location, across the green without drawing attention. It was 3:45 p.m. The California sun sat high and warm over MacArthur Park. Marcus wore a black hoodie and dark joggers, relaxed, unremarkable. Darius sat beside him in a cream jacket over a white tee, a Gucci bag placed casually on the bench to his right. Part of the cover profile they'd been maintaining for days. To anyone watching, they looked like exactly what they were supposed to look like. Two men enjoying a Saturday afternoon. Marcus was running the next operational phase in his head. Darius was watching a jogger past the far tree line, not because he was suspicious, just because that's what 10 years in field intelligence trains you to do. Neither of them expected any disruption. They had done this dozens of times in dozens of cities. The park was active, families on the grass, a street vendor pushing a cart near the south entrance, a pair of tourists photographing the skyline. Security cameras mounted on the park's lampposts covered the main paths. There were at least 7 civilians within visual range. Neither Marcus nor Darius noticed the black and white patrol unit that had pulled slowly along the park's perimeter road and stopped. They didn't see the officer step out. They didn't see him study them from across the path before he started walking in their direction with the kind of deliberate, unhurried pace that isn't curiosity, it's decision. He had already made up his mind before he got within 20 feet. Officer Daniel Hargrove reached the bench at 3:47 p.m. He didn't announce himself from a distance. He closed the gap quickly, stopping less than 4 feet in front of them. Close enough to be deliberate, close enough to establish dominance before a single word was spoken. His right hand rested on his duty belt, thumb hooked near the holster. Not reaching, just resting. The kind of resting that isn't casual. Darius saw him first. Marcus felt it a half-second later, that particular stillness that precedes confrontation. He had seen this approach before, not in textbooks, in the field, in parking lots and hallways and doorways across 12 years of federal work. The angle, the proximity, the posture, this wasn't a wellness check. LAPD, you two need to move along. You've been sitting here a while and we've had complaints about loitering in this area. Marcus kept his hands visible on his knees. His voice stayed level. Officer, I understand. My name is Marcus Bennett. My partner and I are federal agents, FBI. We're working. My credentials are in the bag to my right. I can reach for them slowly if you'll allow me. Hargrove didn't look at the bag. He looked at Marcus. FBI, right. A pause that lasted one beat too long. Anyone can say that. What exactly are two federal agents doing sitting on a park bench in hoodies? The question wasn't investigative. It was a verdict dressed as a question. This is the moment the template plays out in real time, where documentation, credentials, and calm compliance mean nothing, because the conclusion was already written before the approach began. Watch what happens when proof is offered and still refused. Marcus kept his hands flat on his knees. He didn't reach for the bag. He didn't raise his voice. He had trained junior agents on exactly this kind of moment. The discipline required to stay measured when every instinct is telling you that the situation is sliding somewhere dangerous. Officer, I want to cooperate fully, but I'd like to understand the basis for this stop. What specific articulable facts give you reasonable suspicion that we've committed or are about to commit a crime? Hargrove's jaw tightened. Don't come at me with that legal language. You want to play it that way? Fine. I'm asking you both to produce identification. Right now. That's not a request. Darius spoke for the first time, measured and quiet. We've identified ourselves as federal agents. We've offered to show credentials. That offer still stands. Hargrove's hand moved to his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I've got two individuals at MacArthur Park, East Bench area, refusing to cooperate. Requesting backup. Marcus felt something settle cold in his chest. Not panic, but recognition. He had debriefed field operatives who described this exact sequence. He had written training materials about it. The offer of proof had been made twice. It had been dismissed twice. What was happening now had nothing to do with loitering. 30 feet away, a woman pushing a stroller had stopped walking. She was watching. A teenage boy near the vendor cart had his phone up. A jogger had slowed to a walk, then stopped entirely at the tree line, turned around, and was recording from a distance. They saw what Hargrove either couldn't or wouldn't. In documented civil rights cases, civilian video evidence has proven decisive in over 2/3 of successful lawsuits against law enforcement. Without those cameras rolling right now, this moment exists only in competing accounts. With them, it becomes a record. And records have a way of outlasting careers. 2 additional patrol units arrived within 4 minutes. 3 officers total now, fanning out around the bench in a loose arc that left no comfortable direction to stand, no unobserved angle to move. The woman with the stroller had backed up but kept recording. The boy near the vendor cart hadn't moved. A park security camera mounted on the lamppost to the north was fixed on the entire scene. Hargrove turned to the arriving officers, voice low but audible. 2 subjects. Claim to be FBI but won't produce credentials. Uncooperative. Keep an eye on the bag. Marcus heard it, every word. He had used similar language himself in field briefings, clinical, stripped of context, designed to prime the officers arriving cold into the situation. Hearing it used against him carried a particular kind of weight. He tried once more, calmly, methodically. I am Special Agent Marcus Bennett, FBI, badge number 41872. My partner is Special Agent Darius Cole. Our credentials are in the bag on the bench. We have offered to retrieve them twice. We are requesting to speak with your supervising officer immediately. One of the newly arrived officers crossed his arms. Supervisor's been notified. You'll have the chance to sort this out at the station. Darius kept his voice even. We're entitled to verify that by phone. I'd like to contact our field office directly. You can make calls from booking. Right now, we need you both to stand up slowly and keep your hands where we can see them. Marcus felt the full weight of the moment settle across his shoulders. He knew the statistics. He had read the reports, reviewed the footage, sat in rooms where families described what the last minutes before an encounter turned fatal looked like. He knew that credentials, composure, and constitutional knowledge had not always been enough. He also knew that 6 eyes were on him right now and that every camera in that park was still rolling. He made the calculation that black men in America have been forced to make for generations. Not because it was right, but because survival sometimes requires setting aside what is right in favor of what is safe. Marcus stood slowly. He turned around. He placed both hands behind his back and spoke in a voice that was clear, unhurried, and loud enough for every camera to capture. My name is Marcus Bennett. I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I have 12 years of federal service. I am complying with this detention under protest. This stop is unlawful. This detention is unlawful. I want that on record. The cuffs went on hard, tighter than necessary. Hargrove secured them with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this enough times that he no longer thought about how it felt from the other side. Darius was cuffed beside him 30 seconds later, equally silent, equally deliberate in his compliance. Perfect credentials, perfect composure, perfect knowledge of the law, said out loud, on camera. In front of witnesses, and still, handcuffs. Ask yourself what more compliance looks like. Ask yourself what these two men were supposed to do differently. And then ask yourself how many people go through this same sequence without a federal badge waiting in that bag. Marcus Bennett was placed in the back of Hargrove's patrol unit at 3:58 p.m. Darius Cole was transported separately, standard procedure when processing multiple detainees, a detail that was not lost on either of them. Divided, they were easier to manage. Together, they were a federal problem. Through the window, Marcus watched the park recede. The woman with the stroller was still recording. The teenager near the vendor cart had his phone raised. The jogger at the tree line hadn't moved. He held their faces in his memory the way he'd been trained to hold witness details on night hike. Precisely, deliberately, because he already knew he would need them. He spoke clearly toward Hargrove's body camera mounted on the dash. My name is Marcus Bennett, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation, badge number 41872. I am being transported against my will following an unlawful detention. I have not been informed of any charges. I am invoking my right to contact my supervising officer and my attorney. No response from the front seat, just the sound of the radio and the city moving past the glass. Processing took place at the division station. A desk officer recorded his details with the flat efficiency of paperwork. Name, height, weight, identifying marks. They inventoried his personal effects and placed them in a clear plastic bag. His phone, his wallet, $43 in cash, his wedding ring, and his FBI credentials. The same credentials he had offered to produce twice on that park bench. Have you contacted the FBI field office? Have you verified my employment? We'll get to it. I'm entitled to a phone call. I need to reach my supervising agent. You'll have your chance. Just cooperate and this moves faster. They didn't get to it. They didn't verify. They didn't call. The holding cell was approximately 10 feet by 10 feet. Concrete bench along the back wall, a metal fixture in the corner, a fluorescent light overhead that emitted a faint, persistent hum that Marcus would later describe in his formal complaint with clinical precision. Not because it was the worst part, but because details matter and he was still an investigator even sitting in a cage. He looked at the clock on the wall opposite the cell door. It read 4:31 p.m. He was supposed to be home by 6. His daughter had a school recital that evening, her first. He had marked it in his calendar 3 weeks ago. His wife had texted him that morning to confirm he'd make it. Instead, he was sitting on a concrete bench in a detention cell, his credentials in a plastic bag at a processing desk, waiting for someone to make a phone call that should have taken 4 minutes and still hadn't happened. 12 years. A director's award, hundreds of operations, and none of it, not a single day of it, was visible to the system processing him right now. 3 hours. That is how long Marcus Bennett sat in that cell before anyone came. Not 3 days. Not 3 weeks. 3 hours. But 3 hours inside a 10 by 10 room when you've done nothing wrong, when no one tells you anything, when the fluorescent light hums and the clock moves and you start to understand, viscerally, not academically, what it means for the system to treat your word as worthless. 3 hours is not a number. It is a lesson. And it is one that no federal badge should ever have to teach its owner from the inside of a cell. At 7:02 p.m., 3 hours and 4 minutes after Marcus Bennett was placed in that holding cell, the door opened. The man who opened it was Lieutenant Raymond Castillo, watch commander for the division. He was holding a manila folder. He was not making eye contact. Marcus had spent 12 years reading people in high-pressure environments. And he recognized the expression on Castillo's face immediately. It wasn't remorse and it wasn't anger. It was the look of someone who had just understood the full dimensions of a problem and was still calculating how to contain it. Mr. Bennett, we've verified your identity and your employment with the Bureau. You're free to go. Marcus didn't move toward the door. He stood up slowly from the concrete bench, straightened to his full height, and looked directly at Castillo with the same measured stillness he had maintained since 3:47 p.m. Verified my identity. I gave Officer Hargrove my name, my badge number, and my field office contact at 3:48 p.m. I offered to produce physical credentials twice before being cuffed. What exactly took this division 3 hours to make a single phone call? Castillo shifted the folder. There was a miscommunication during the intake process. The verification request wasn't flagged as priority. I understand this has been an extremely frustrating experience, and I want to assure you, I want the badge numbers of every officer involved in this stop. I want the names of every person who handled my processing. I want a written report stating the specific legal basis for my detention. And I want a copy of every second of body camera footage recorded from the moment Officer Hargrove stepped out of his vehicle. Castillo extended a business card. If you'd like to file a formal complaint, Internal Affairs handles that process. I can have someone walk you through. Marcus looked at the card without taking it. Lieutenant, I have been a federal agent for 12 years. I have worked alongside Internal Affairs divisions in 4 states. I know exactly how that process works, and I know precisely what its clearance rate looks like for complaints involving officers with 6 prior dismissals on their record. He paused. You will be hearing from my attorney and from my field office, and I strongly suggest you preserve every piece of documentation from today before either of those calls arrives. He picked up the business card then, not because he needed it, because he wanted Castillo to watch him take it. Darius Cole was released from a separate holding area 11 minutes later. Neither man spoke until they were outside the building, standing under a sky that had gone fully dark while they were inside. In those 3 hours, Marcus Bennett lost something that his badge, his title, and his federal clearance could not restore. Not the time, not the missed recital. Something quieter and more permanent than that. The insulation. The professional distance that had allowed him to study injustice as a system without fully inhabiting it as a person. That distance was gone now, and no settlement figure, no internal review, no letter of apology from a police lieutenant with a manila folder would give it back. Marcus retrieved his property at 7:19 p.m. Phone, wallet, wedding ring, credentials. Signed the release form with the same deliberate clarity he had used to state his name on every body camera he had faced that afternoon, and walked out of the division station into the night air. His vehicle was still at MacArthur Park, a mile and a half away. He called a Lyft. He sat on the curb outside the station and waited. And while he waited, he opened his phone and began documenting. Time, sequence, names, badge numbers. Every detail he could reconstruct while the architecture of the afternoon was still sharp. He had taught field agents to do this after high-stress operations. He did it now by instinct, by discipline, and because he understood that memory degrades and records don't. He drove home at 8:04 p.m. His wife met him at the door. His daughter's recital had ended 2 hours earlier. He sat at the kitchen table and told his wife everything. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she didn't say she was sorry. She said, "What are we doing about it?" The following Monday morning, Marcus contacted Special Agent in Charge Diane Mercer, his direct supervisor at the Los Angeles field office. Mercer listened to the full account across 20 uninterrupted minutes. When Marcus finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Marcus, I have been in this bureau for 19 years. What you are describing, the refusal to verify credentials, the separation during transport, the 3-hour hold without contact, none of that is ambiguous. None of it. That is a textbook Fourth Amendment violation, and I want it documented at every level before the end of this week. I'm filing a federal lawsuit, Marcus said. This isn't an internal complaint. I'm going outside the system. I support that completely, and so will this office. 2 days later, Marcus sat across from civil rights attorney Veronica Shaw in her downtown Los Angeles office. Shaw had spent 17 years litigating civil rights cases against municipal law enforcement agencies across California, with a record of 7-figure verdicts in 4 of her last 6 federal trials. She reviewed the documentation Marcus had compiled. his written account, Darius Cole's parallel statement, the names of civilian witnesses, the timeline of credential offers and dismissals, and the complaint history she had already pulled independently on Officer Daniel Hargrove. "This is not a borderline case," she said, setting the file down. "You identified yourself. You offered proof. You complied completely and vocally. You were held for 3 hours without verification or legal basis. And the officer who initiated this stop has 6 prior complaints for racial profiling, all dismissed. What you have here is exactly what the Civil Rights Act of 1871 was designed to address." "How long?" Marcus asked. "Federal civil rights cases move slowly, 2 years minimum, likely closer to 3. They'll offer a settlement before it ever reaches a jury, probably within the first year." "I'm not settling." Shaw nodded, not surprised. "Then prepare yourself. The city's legal team will go through your career file line by line. Every arrest you made that was later challenged, every complaint ever filed against you regardless of outcome, every decision you made in the field that can be reframed. They will attempt to establish that you are not a credible victim. They will try to make you the story." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Let them. I have 12 years of federal service, a director's award, and a plastic bag full of credentials that a city police officer refused to look at for 3 hours. Let them try to make that my fault." This is the moment the narrative shifts in ways that are difficult to watch. Marcus Bennett entered that park as a federal agent doing his job. He exits this chapter as a plaintiff, a black man navigating a legal system that will now scrutinize everything he has ever done in order to justify what was done to him. The institution he spent 12 years serving is about to become the institution he has to fight. And the distance between those two positions is exactly as wide as a park bench in the Los Angeles afternoon sun. The city of Los Angeles made its first offer 8 months after the lawsuit was filed. $90,000, a written acknowledgement of procedural irregularities, and a mutual non-disclosure agreement. Marcus didn't consult Veronica Shaw before declining. He already knew his answer. 4 months later, the offer was $400,000, then $750,000. Each time, the city's legal team attached language designed to close the matter quietly, without admission of liability, in the interest of resolution, acknowledging no wrongdoing on the part of the department or its officers. Each time, Marcus declined. "This isn't about what the number does for my bank account," he told Shaw after the third rejection. "Every time they settle without admission, Hargrove keeps his record clean, the department keeps its narrative intact, and the next man on that bench has no precedent to point to. I'm not buying silence. Not with my name on the paperwork." The case went to trial 26 months after the arrest. United States District Court, Central District of California. Judge Patricia Kimberly presiding. On the morning of day 2, Veronica Shaw moved to play the body camera footage in full. Hargrove's unit camera, the dash-mounted recording from the second patrol vehicle, and 17 minutes of civilian phone footage compiled from 3 separate witnesses at the scene. The courtroom was quiet in the way that rooms go quiet when something undeniable is being shown to people who were prepared to debate it. Juror number 4, a woman in her late 50s, retired schoolteacher, second row from the left, stopped taking notes when the footage reached the moment the handcuffs went on. She watched with her pen suspended above her legal pad and did not write anything for the next 4 minutes. On day 4, Veronica Shaw called Officer Daniel Hargrove to the stand. "Officer Hargrove, when you approached the bench at MacArthur Park on the afternoon in question, what specific behavior had you personally observed that gave you reasonable suspicion a crime had been or was about to be committed?" The individuals had been stationary for an extended period. The area had a history of drug-related activity. Their clothing and the bag present were inconsistent with... They didn't fit the profile of typical park users in that area at that time. Inconsistent with typical park users. Can you define for the jury what a typical park user looks like? A pause. It's a totality of circumstances assessment. It's discretionary. The bag you referenced, the one you instructed arriving officers to watch, that bag contained FBI credentials. You were offered access to that bag twice before backup arrived. Why didn't you look? I had no way to verify the claim at that point in time. You had no way to verify it, or you chose not to? Hargrove looked at the defense table. I exercised my discretion based on the totality of. In your 14 years of service and 6 prior complaints involving black male detainees, Officer Hargrove, can you point to a single instance where you stopped 2 white men sitting on a park bench in casual clothing and asked them to move along for looking inconsistent with the area? The defense objected. Judge Kimberly sustained it on form. But the question had already landed, and the jury had already heard it. And the answer, the silence that preceded the objection, had already been recorded in the memory of 12 people who would be filing into a deliberation room within 48 hours. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 19 minutes. When the verdict came, the damages awarded totaled $1.85 million between the 2 plaintiffs. The city would pay it, not Hargrove, not the department's legal fund. The city, meaning the taxpayers of Los Angeles, the same public that Marcus and Darius had spent their careers protecting. Officer Daniel Hargrove kept his badge. He was reassigned to a different division pending an internal review. His pension remained intact. His record, which now included a civil judgment, would be reviewed by the department's oversight board on a timeline that had not yet been publicly determined. The jury awarded $1.85 million and could not award the one thing that would have made the number matter. Consequence for the man who stood at the center of it? The money comes from the public. The officer goes back to work. Ask yourself with full seriousness whether that is a system correcting itself or a system absorbing the cost of its own behavior and continuing unchanged. The jury had already delivered its findings in Chapter 8, 3 hours and 19 minutes of deliberation, $1.85 million in total damages. But the formal reading of the verdict in open court carried a weight that the number alone could not fully contain. The jury found the City of Los Angeles liable on all counts. Compensatory damages of $1.1 million were awarded jointly to Marcus Bennett and Darius Cole for emotional distress, loss of dignity, and violation of constitutional rights under the 4th and 14th Amendments. Punitive damages of $750,000 were added to send, in the court's language, a clear deterrent message regarding discriminatory enforcement practices. Marcus Bennett sat at the plaintiff's table and did not smile. He did not exhale with relief or turn to embrace his attorney or close his eyes. He sat with his hands folded on the table in front of him and looked at a fixed point on the far wall. And the people who knew him well enough to read his face saw something that wasn't satisfaction and wasn't grief. It was the expression of a man who had been proven right about something he never wanted to be right about. The money did not give back the recital. It did not undo what his daughter had been told when she asked why her father wasn't there. It did not restore the 3 hours on a concrete bench or the fluorescent hum or the moment the cuffs went on despite every credential, every word of compliance, every legal articulation he had offered into the open air of a public park on a Saturday afternoon. Officer Daniel Hargrove was suspended for 30 days without pay following the verdict. He was not terminated. He was not criminally charged. After his suspension concluded, he was returned to active duty in a reassigned division. His pension remained untouched. His personnel file now contained a civil judgment, a notation, not a consequence. The LAPD announced in the months following the verdict that it would implement revised credentialing verification protocols for stops involving individuals claiming law enforcement status, alongside mandatory implicit bias retraining for all patrol officers with 2 or more sustained complaints in a 5-year period. Whether those measures changed anything on the ground in real stops, in real parks, on real afternoons, remained a question that policy documents could not answer. Marcus Bennett submitted his resignation from the FBI 14 months after the verdict. He cited no single reason in his formal letter. In a later interview, he said this: "I spent 12 years believing that the badge made a difference. Not just the work, the badge itself. That it communicated something, that it was a kind of protection. And I found out on a park bench in Los Angeles that it doesn't communicate anything the person looking at it doesn't already want to see. I can't keep asking other people to trust a system that I sat inside of for 3 hours wondering if anyone was coming. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm done." If you believe that a civil judgment without personal consequence is not accountability, share this story. If you think that $1.85 million paid by taxpayers while an officer returns to full duty represents a system working as designed rather than as promised, say so in the comments. And if you have ever been made to feel that you did not belong in a space where you had every legal right to exist, your story belongs here too. Drop it below. We will read it. Every single one. Marcus Bennett used his share of the settlement to establish the Bennett-Cole Initiative, a nonprofit civil rights organization headquartered in Los Angeles, co-founded with Darius Cole, who had submitted his own resignation from the Bureau 6 months after Marcus. 3 years after that Saturday afternoon in MacArthur Park, the initiative had trained over 4,000 civilians in documentation rights, lawful detention procedures, and on-scene recording protocols. It had funded legal defense for 31 individuals who could not otherwise afford civil rights representation. It had successfully lobbied for 2 pieces of municipal legislation in California, requiring independent review of all civilian complaints against officers with 3 or more prior allegations. Legislation that the LAPD's own union had fought against in committee for 14 months before it passed. Darius Cole ran the initiative's digital infrastructure and training program. Marcus spoke at universities, community centers, law enforcement academies, and twice before state legislative subcommittees on policing reform. He wore no badge to any of it. The $1.85 million didn't heal what happened on that bench. It didn't give me back that recital, or the 3 hours, or the version of myself that believed the system I served would recognize me when it mattered. But it gave us the resources to make sure that when the next person sits on that bench, without a federal badge in their bag, without a director's award in their file, without 12 years of service to point to, they are not alone. I'll keep doing this until the credential that protects you in a public park is your humanity. Nothing more, nothing less. That should have always been enough. If you believe that dignity is not a credential that needs to be earned, share this story. If you've ever been made to prove you belong somewhere you had every right to be, tell us in the comments. And if you think the stories that don't make the news matter just as much as the ones that do, subscribe, because justice costs exactly what it should. Everything. And we are not done paying attention.